September 12th, 1984. I'm Joe Todd, and this is an interview with Della Poorbaugh. Ma'am, where were you born?
I was the first baby born in Knowles. But you don't need to put that down. That I was born at Knowles.
How do you spell the town?
Knowles.
And where's that located?
It's on Highway 64, about 21 miles east of here.
And when's your birthday?
February the 4th, 19. Oh, you want the year I was born?
Yes, ma'am.
1913.
1913. Who is your father?
Charlie Andrew Easton. They called him Chuck, because that's what he went by,
Yeah.
you know, most of the time,
Right.
Chuck Easton.
And your mother?
Roxy Condon.
What's the last name?
Condon, Condgon.
What kind of work did your father do?
Well, he just did about everything. When he came to the Panhandle, of course he came in 1905, and it was just new country. And he came out here, and he was a barber. And then in later years, he run a cream station, bought poultry from all over that area in South Florida.
What's a cream station?
Well, that's where the farmers used to milk cows and separate the cream and bring it in, and they tested it, and so much butter fat you was paid so much a pound for your butter fat. And it also, they bought poultry and hides, all types of hides.
Did he have like a store, or?
No, it was just a station, and then behind was poultry pens, and then a place to store hides. And these were shipped out on the railroad. The dray wagons came every morning along about 5 o'clock and picked up the eggs and the cream and the hides and the chickens. There used to be a lot go out of there.
Yeah. Now, was this at Knowles?
Yeah. Yeah.
And did your father file on a homestead?
He came out and he went into Woodward to file, and this quarter of land that he was after, because see, this was getting pretty well taken up, and he went in there to file on this land, and the file clerk, she went through and she said, this land is taken, this piece of land. But she came up with the land. So that it was a piece of skullduggery, you know, it wasn't.
He didn't try to do anything about it? Or?
No, they didn't try to do anything about it. Not back in those days.
Yeah. Did you help your father around the station?
Oh, I was pretty much a kid. And of course I grew up with all this. At this time, why, something that I know the younger never heard of, long about Thanksgiving time, they had long pens, and those that raised turkeys brought them in, and they'd clean turkeys. Every kid after school would be down there to help defeather these turkeys. But you know, they'd hang them up and they'd cut their throat and the feathers just dropped down, and then they was very easily to clean. And they would box these turkeys in a box that looked like a rough box, but they'd hang overnight. It was in the fall of the year, you know. They'd hang overnight. Then they would put them in these boxes, and they would ship to Woodward, where, you know, they was put on the market. But that's the way they did this along at Thanksgiving time. But there'd be hundreds of turkeys go out of there. But every kid, I think they got 10 cents a turkey for taking the feathers off these turkeys.
Now, who raised the turkeys?
The farmers.
The farmers?
The farmers, yeah. A lot of turkeys that was raised in that country. Just like their broom corn.
Right.
They would, Knowles was known as the broom corn capital because we got all of our broom corn south of the river. They all brought their broom corn in there, and we had a big broom corn warehouse close to the railroad track, and they would unload this broom corn, and their wagons would hold just about 3 bales of broom corn. Now that's quite a bit of corn in a broom corn, but that's what they had on these wagons.
Do they make brooms at Knowles?
There was some people, but there wasn't a broom factory.
Yeah.
But there was some people that would make brooms at home, and they'd sell them, you know.
What kind of chores did you do as a little girl around the house?
What kind of chores?
Yeah.
Oh, I was an outdoor type. I liked outdoors, and so Mom really had a hard time getting me in the house. Although I could more than boil water.
When did you start school?
Where did I?
Yes, ma'am.
In Knowles.
Knowles. What was the name of the school?
Knowles.
Knowles.
Knowles School.
How big was it?
Well, at one time we had a big enrollment. Oh, I just, you know, for that smaller town, and at that time they was still country school.
Yeah.
But when these kids get ready for high school, they came in. I know we had children from south of the river that would come up there, and they would have rooms at the hotel, or they'd have a room at a private home. Some of them had batching quarters, but we had just a pretty good sized school. And
Who was your favorite teacher?
who was my favorite teacher?
Yes, ma'am.
I think Bessie Reed was, and she was born and raised south of the Beaver River down there. Bessie Reed.
What grades did she teach?
She taught the 3rd and 4th.
Do you remember anything about World War I?
Oh, yes.
Tell me
Yeah.
about it.
Well, I know one time my uncle came just before he got ready to go across. He made a surprise trip home. He was stationed at San Antonio, Texas. And it was a surprise trip, you know, nobody knew that he was coming. And he came to our house first because we lived in town, and then we took him out to the farm. And I know he was all dressed up in his uniform, and we had a big family gathering while he was there. Then after he went across, of course we heard from him quite quite regular, and but he was over there even a year after the war. He stayed over there. He was one of the about one of the first ones that went across from that area.
Yeah. Do you remember Armistice Day?
Well, no, not really. I just really don't remember, although we were in Iowa at the time, just on a visit, and I remember the people, and the crowd of people, and they had the band out. And, yeah.
How many years did you go to school?
I graduated in 1933.
From high school?
Yeah, I didn't go to college. That was back during the Depression.
Right. Tell me about the Depression.
Oh, it was really something. My husband and I were married during the Depression. We worked. We got 50 cents apiece a day. We worked for Frank Wells on the ranch. He fed bulls and I cooked. I baked bread every day. And, but at the end of the month we had $30. And that was a lot better than some of them have. And
That's right.
Mr. Wells would say, "Can you kids wait till next month?" He said it'd take a cow and a calf if I paid you now, which it would. It'd take a cow and a calf to pay you. That's how cheap they were.
How big was the Wells Ranch?
Oh, the Wells Ranch was, I just can't tell you how many acres it was. I imagine they was 700 acres. Might have been more than that because it extended up to the highway pretty well.
Where's it located? The Wells Ranch?
Do you know where Boardman Barbie lives?
I've heard of
Not
Barbie.
Boardman. I meant Stanley Barbie lives.
I've heard of the Barbie Ranch.
Have you heard of the Allen Ranch?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, the Wells had it before Allen's.
Okay.
The Allen Ranch. Yeah. And it was a nice spread,
When did he establish that ranch?
Well, it was first established by Frank Sislow years and years back. I think that was established in about 1911, 12, maybe before then.
And your husband fed bulls and you baked
I
bread?
cooked every day.
What'd you cook?
Well, just anything they could rake up. Of course, they had meat. They had meat. But baked bread every day.
Yeah.
Well, that was. But I had about 7 to cook for. At 7, 3 times a day. Well, that was. And
What about the dust storms?
oh,
Tell me about them.
our dirt storms was terrible. In fact, a lot of people lost their ceilings in their house. See, most of the ceilings in the house, they wasn't sheetrock. They were lath ceilings. And the laths pulled loose. The weight got so heavy on account of the dust. Well, it break loose and come down. I know one morning we got up and the ceiling kitchen had fell off. Laying on the part of it was on the cook stove and clear across, And people would hang wet sheets at the window to keep the dust out. A lot of them had what they call dust pneumonia. And
Were you here for the Black Duster?
oh yes, Yeah.
Tell me about the Black Duster.
Well, my husband and I were down at his folks, and we started over to our place, which was on a half section to the northeast, to the northwest of them, and we just got a little ways from the house, and we had some horses up on a field up there, and we had a white horse up there, and he just disappeared. And I said, Alan, that cloud is closer than you think for. And that just come over just like well, you've seen heavy smoke from burning from tires. Well, that just folded over just like that, just as black as it could be. And ahead of this cloud was the birds, and they made they was frightened, just made the office twittering noise. And all of these horses disappeared, and we turned around and we went back, and he turned on the light, and we run into the house. You couldn't see anything. We run into the house. Mother had lit a lamp, and it just blazed, didn't look any bigger than this. You couldn't see anything outside of it. Of course, we went to the cave, and when we came out, the sky was just as red as if it was on fire. It was just as red as it could be. And but the dirt was terrible. You'd try to cover up things, especially the table and the dish and thing, to have them for the next morning. But there wasn't you couldn't keep it out. It was there.
How did you serve food in those dust storms?
How did we what?
Serve food.
Well, when you set the table, you turn the plate upside down. That's one thing. And you kept the lids on the pot. You ate a lot of dirt. Yeah, and you always kept water and just wipe. You didn't keep soap in it. If you just wipe off the dust, why, you felt, well, if we ever had a still day, then we had a house cleaning. And it wouldn't be nothing to take up a scoop full of dirt off of one floor, maybe a 12, 16 space, why, you'd get a scoop of dirt. Yeah.
Well, what about World War II?
Oh, yes.
Did you do any work for the war effort?
Oh, yes, of course, we did what we could out here. We farmed, and you couldn't get help. I'll tell you, I put many hours on the tractor. What I mean, we didn't have the gasoline to go to the field and come back for dinner. We'd take our dinner, and then we didn't come in till 10 o'clock that night because we didn't have the gasoline to go back and forth. And no, I put a lot of hours on the tractor, and we'd get up at 4 o'clock, go 4 o'clock in the morning to the field.
What's your husband's name?
Alan
Poorbaugh. How long have you been married?
How long we been married? Oh, we celebrated our 50th anniversary last November. And the worst storm of the year. Yeah. We just have one son.
Where's he?
He's in Yuma, Arizona.
Yuma.
Yeah. Hot. Yeah.
What kind of games you play as a child?
Oh, yeah. These party games, they used to have out in the yard, Skip to Maluma Darling, Happy as a Miller Boy, and all that type. And then the younger games was Annie Over and Sheep My Pen and Shinny and baseball. I played a lot of baseball. My dad was a pitcher. He pitched for Enid when he was a young man. Then when he came out here, he pitched And,
Well, any more you want to talk about?
well, nothing that I can think of. This is something you want to ask me. Why,
No.
of the,
Mainly we want to talk about the dust storms and the depression and... Where'd your parents come from originally?
well, my dad came from Illinois, and they came to Garfield County, and then he came on out here when he was a young man, and he worked for the surveying crew when they surveyed. See, this whole country was they put rocks in the section lines to mark it all through this country, but you don't find many of them anymore. But he helped survey when they came out through here.
Where's your mother from?
She came from Iowa, and there was quite a bunch came from Iowa. When they came, the Jamesons and the Alcars and they all came from one locality, and they all settled there at Knowles. And when Dad came out here, so many came from the same place he did in Illinois, and they all came out here, the Frys and Holtcamps and just a lot of those people. And they're all buried at Knowles now. They all stayed, you know, weathered the hardships, but
What about the flu epidemic of 1918?
well, you know, our neighbor, they lost 3 children, just in a matter, well, they all, 2 of them died the same day, just in a matter of minutes, and another died the next day, and then the mother died the next day. Yeah, their name was Sagerty. And he lost his whole family.
Where did they live?
They lived in Knowles. They were our neighbors. Alfred Sagerty was their name. And they lost their whole family. And at that same time, the flu epidemic was so bad, why they run out of coal in Knowles. Nobody had any fuel. And the elevators had ordered coal, because that's where the coal came into. They had big bins for them, you know. Well, a train freight would come up, coal was on it, and never stopped. They'd go right on over the hill west. So it got to the point they were just destitute for coal. Nobody had any. And when they come through, there was heavily laden, you know, with freight to make this grade to the west. And a lot of the men got on that train, and they threw off. It was shoulder coal, they called it, you know, these big chunks.
Yeah.
They threw it off, and it was distributed to people that had to have it, that had sickness. They had to have this. But then they made it right, you know, with the company, but they needed coal. They couldn't come to Beaver after it, or to Oregon was their next stop, or maybe Mocaine, but they had to have this coal.
Were either of your grandfathers in the Civil War?
No. Great-grandfather was. Now, I had a step-grandfather that was in the Civil War. And
have you ever heard any stories about the Civil War? What happened?
well, no, he lived in Fort Dodge, Kansas up here, and we went there quite often when he's there, you know. And there was 1 or 2 or 3 of them that was from the South, and they didn't get along too well at croquet time. But,
Well, I think we have a good interview.
well,
Anything else you want to talk about?
no, I can't think of anything.
Poorbaugh of Knowles, Oklahoma. She is going to tell us about Sand City. Okay, Della?
Well, I recall things that my parents had told me about Sand City. My father came there in 1906, and a young man, and his interest was he was going to homestead, but this area was taken up. And he didn't get to homestead, but he had places of business. They run mother had a bake shop in Knowles. But in Sand City, he was a ball player, and they had their ball team, and he was a pitcher.
Now, this was before Knowles was...
This was before Knowles. And I've heard them talk about the activity that they've had on Saturdays, of their ball team.
Yes.
And the Main Street run north and south.
That was on the section line.
Yes. Yeah. And it run north and south. Every Saturday was a big day, and they'd have foot races.
And how many stores were there?
Well, there was a hardware store. It kept everything, and it was a long building facing the east. And then to the north was a little hotel, and I think they called it the Cottage Hotel, and it was moved down in the Knowles, what is now Knowles. After the railroad came in.
Yes.
And it was moved down into Knowles. And several of the dwellings also moved out of Sand City, and some of them are still standing today. They're old buildings, but they're still. And several of the buildings, the store buildings, they moved down there. And a little printing press moved down there.
What was the name of the paper they printed?
Oh, I see. I can't think, but was it the Sage Hen? Have you ever heard of the Sage Hen?
No, but then it could have been.
I think it was the Sage Hen.
The Sage Hen. Okay.
Oh,
did they have any saloons?
The what?
Saloons?
No, not. They sold it. There was, but there was no really a saloon. But there was some that was kept in the stores.
Yes. How many grocery stores were there?
Just one.
Just one.
Just one grocery store. See, Sand City wasn't there very long. It was named after Dr. Sands. It was a doctor, one of the early doctors that came.
And his office was there?
Yeah, his office was there. He had a little office.
Okay.
And, there was a blacksmith shop there. And Charlie Frame, a fellow by the name of Charlie Frame, run this little blacksmith shop. In fact, he was the fellow that found the big meteorite that's in the Smithsonian Institution.
Oh, yes.
That's him. That's where this came from this little blacksmith shop. It was a doorstop.
And where did he find it, do you know?
Up on the Cimarron River.
Well.
Up on the Cimarron River.
All right, now, this was before the railroad came through.
Yes.
What year did the railroad come
11.
through?
The railroad.
1911?
Yeah.
And it missed Sand City by what?
It missed Sand City about a half a mile.
Is that all?
That's all. And they moved the stores up, buildings there were, down to the Knowles. And Knowles got its name from Francis Knowles, Mrs. Lundy. This was a stepson of Mrs. Lundy's, and she gave the land, the town site, and if they would name the town Knowles.
After her stepson.
After her stepson.
Well, I've often wondered how that came about.
Francis Knowles.
And then these buildings all moved.
Yeah.
Over
They
there.
moved down. Yeah. After they moved into Knowles, by Knowles flourished, they even had a music store.
Well,
Daily run the music store.
yes.
And they had 5 grocery stores at one time, Knowles did.
Well,
Yeah. 2 livery stables, 3 elevators, 2 lumber yards.
well,
Yeah.
I didn't know it was that big.
Yeah. And now up at in San City, they had a small church, and they held school there in San City.
And what was the name of the school?
Well, they didn't call it a name. Then they built a school west of Knowles, and the first Esther school was just about 3 miles out, and then they moved it on west. Then Knowles built the bigger school,
Yes.
and they moved this little church out of Knowles, and it went down in the Zelma area and served them for a church. They held church down there.
Well, And Selma was about 5 miles away from Knowles?
From Knowles, no, it was about 6 miles.
6 miles.
But there's Zelma had a big school in
Now
Zelma.
spells Zelma.
Z-E-L-M-A.
Z-E-L-M-A. Okay. Is there anything else you can think about it?
No, not that I can, I just wouldn't know what you'd be interested in.
Well, just the history of the town. I've always heard that there was Sand City, but nobody ever straightened me out on it.
Yeah, it was named after Doc Sands.
Yes.
Yeah.
He was an early day doctor.
Yeah, he was an early day doctor. Then after they moved down in Knowles, why, we had another doctor, Dr. Rogers. Knowles, why, we had another doctor, Dr. Rogers, came there. And he was there. He was an early time doctor and was there for years and years until I think they moved out in about 1930.
Then Knowles became a town in about 1911 or
No,
12.
Knowles didn't get their what is it when they organized for a town?
Their plat.
Their plat until in 1913.
That's it.
And they got their plat then and selected their officers and everything.
And became a incorporated town.
Became a cooperated town then.
Okay, thank you, Della.
Yeah, well, I hope that'll be a little of interest.
It will be. You've saved history today. Thank you so much.